Hi everyone. I hope that you're all having a wonderful week. We're heading into week 5 of our Introduction to Education online course. It's almost time to begin all of our field experience, our hours in the classroom, and I'll be getting with you over that very soon if I haven't already. And I hope that this video just finds you very well. This week we're going to be looking at Chapter 6 in our Those Who Can Teach text, and the title of this chapter is What Makes a Teacher Effective. So let's go ahead and turn to page 155 in our text, and we will get started by looking at our objectives. So our learning objectives for this chapter, 1, identify at least 3 assumptions or actions that a novice teacher can make or take that can contribute to classroom difficulties. 2, describe what is meant by the teacher as a reflective decision maker and identify at least 3 major types of decisions teachers make. Number 3, identify 5 areas of competence that effective teachers possess. Number 4, name 4 types of attitudes that affect teachers' behaviors. Oh, hold on. One of my speakers back here fell. Let me pick that back up. Okay. Number 5, define and give an example of pedagogical content knowledge in your own subject field. Number 6, give an example of an educational theory that can be used to solve a practical problem in the classroom. 7, define the terms personal practical knowledge and give an example. And lastly, we're going to be identifying at least 5 classroom teaching skills that you believe essential for teaching effectiveness. I do want to go ahead at this time before we head into the PowerPoint and talk to you about TESS. TESS is the Teacher Excellence Support System. That is specific to Arkansas. That is due to some legislation that went through a few years ago and has been enacted due to that legislation through the Arkansas Department of Education. So guys, as long as I have been in the education field, teachers have been evaluated. Now, when I first started teaching, teachers were evaluated according to a plan that the district came up with. So we're looking at something that principals, superintendent, and the school board put into place as school policy. That evaluation wasn't standardized across the state. So you might be in a school district that had a very lax evaluation system, and then you might have been in a school that had a very stringent and supportive evaluation system. So with the dawn of TESS, that's the Teacher Excellence Support System. What we see is a multifaceted and interrelated, standardized way of tracking teacher progress. So there's a lot involved in TESS, but just to put it as simply as possible, you're looking at a series of evaluations from someone who is trained in the different aspects of TESS, the things that promote teacher effectiveness. We're also looking at classroom visits, we're looking at personal conferences, and also you're looking at a self-reflection. When we think about planning lessons, as you get into other classes throughout your education career, you'll even be looking at lesson planning according to the TESS directives. There are a lot of pieces involved in TESS, but like I said, to simply put it, it's a way to help teachers become effective, to really capitalize on the strengths that you have as an educator, whether it be communicating with your colleagues or with parents. Maybe it's in identifying the needs of students. Maybe your strength is in lesson planning. And then also to identify the weaknesses that you have as a teacher and to really focus on, okay, so this is my weakness. Now, how can I be a better teacher? How can I build upon that weakness to where it's no longer a weakness? So it really takes some solid reflective practice and really just looking at yourself as an educator. And there are going to be TESS trained professionals on your campuses that will help you through that reflection process and also help you and guide you in, okay, how do you become a better teacher? And guys, I can tell you just from my personal experience, one of the best professional developments that I have ever done is just knowing a teacher that I knew was an excellent teacher, talking to that teacher, watching that teacher, just really going to that teacher as a mentor and saying, "Hey, you are fabulous, and what can you do to help me to be a better teacher?" And so often teachers are so ready to share their knowledge and their experiences. And also, guys, they're willing to share their failures, because what we know about becoming a great teacher is that oftentimes it takes a series of failures to get us there. And it's just not giving up when we fail, just continuing to try. And again, being truly reflective so that we can be the best teacher that we can be for these students that we have. Okay. So let's delve a little bit into our PowerPoint. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we have our PowerPoint. Again, this is Chapter 6, What Makes a Teacher Effective. If I was to ask you to think of effective teachers that you had in the past, hopefully you would have a very lengthy list. And then if I was to in turn say, okay, talk to me about some teachers that you had that weren't very effective, hopefully that list would be a little bit shorter. But I can almost guarantee that all of you would have a few teachers to add to that list. So let's think about some questions that reflective teachers ask. So a few minutes ago when I was talking about tests, that teacher excellence support system, I know I said the word reflection and reflective multiple times, because really reflecting on what went well today, what went not so well today, and then maybe what went great this last year, what went not so great this last year. Really thinking about your practice and being reflective. What am I doing and why is one question that we're asking. Secondly, how can I better meet my students' needs? And guys, I have to add this in. The needs of the same student can change day to day, from morning to afternoon, and just really be, their needs can have a big range. What are some alternative learning activities to achieve these objectives? And it goes back to those things we talked about in Chapter 3. We're looking at multiple intelligences and different learning styles. And fourthly, how could I have encouraged more involvement or learning on the part of the teacher? On the part of the students. It is so important for students to be engaged. All right, some three stages of decision making. We have planning decisions, where we're actually implementing those plans. And then lastly, we're evaluating, how was my planning? How was my implementation? Did I maybe lecture too long without visuals? Did I not have enough hands-on activity? When I asked a few questions throughout, were the kids getting the things that I wanted them to know? Some aspects of reflective decision making. Guys, I cannot say how important your attitude is. An attitude that fosters learning and genuine human relationships. I can definitely say that in my years as a teacher, there were times that I really failed students because I was so busy with things that I needed to do at work, things that I needed to do after work. You know, it was just that human nature, where when those students were talking to me about things that were important in their lives, or maybe they were in their own way telling me what they needed from me as a teacher. And guys, regrettably, I let too many of those conversations slip to the side because I was so involved in whatever else was on my mind at the time. And it is so important to truly establish those human relationships. When you have a child or a young adolescent in your classroom and they are talking to you, be sure that you stop what you're doing and kind of clear your mind and really listen to what that student is saying to you. That can also help to foster learning as well, because oftentimes kids will convey to you how that they learn the best if you'll truly pay attention. And I have to add this in as well, that when we think about making reflective decisions, your attitude, you have to be very open to knowing, hey, here's where I was a rock star, and here is where I did not do very well, and I really need to change that. And guys, that's something that is ongoing throughout the day, the week, and the year, and your entire career. Another thing is going to be knowledge. I think it's very important that you continue to learn. Like I said, talk to the teacher across the hall, talk to the teacher that teaches in another school district, attend professional development as much as you possibly can, and learn more, because that knowledge is going to make a big contribution to your decision making. We have our subject matter knowledge, your theoretical knowledge, and also that personal practical knowledge. And lastly, some teaching skills that promote student learning. Again, learn from each other. If you see someone teaching a skill and they have nailed it, they're teaching these students and the students are learning, try it. It may be out of your comfort zone and it may not work for the students that you have, but always try new teaching skills to promote student learning and vary those teaching skills. All right, let's take a peek at this chart. We're looking at teacher competence areas to instructional decision making. This chart is in your text on page 161, if you'd like to look at it there. In the top, we have our areas of teacher competence. Again, those attitudes, the knowledge, and again, the theoretical knowledge, the personal practical knowledge, and the skills of teaching. And those all go into our instructional decision making, and then the slide that we looked at before, where we're planning, we're implementing, and we're evaluating. And if you'll really take a peek at those arrows, it's that constant feedback loop. Your planning goes into your implementing, your implementation goes into your evaluation, and then from your evaluation, it goes right back to how you plan and implement the next time. It's a continuous feedback loop. So what attitudes does the effective teacher possess? And I could probably have you guys make a list for me. Let's see how it compares to this list. Your attitude towards yourself is achieved through reflection, study, and participant observation. So how are you feeling about you at the time? It's, a positive attitude. It sounds like a bumper sticker, guys, but a positive attitude can really go a long way. Your attitude toward children, that positive attitude towards children and the adolescents that you're going to be teaching, and the high expectations for students, a willingness to examine your own negative attitudes. Guys, it is human nature to group children together as far as ideas about how you perceive them. I really want to encourage you as a future educator to step out of that box and really get to know people. And it kind of goes, again, it kind of goes against that human nature. Make sure that you are very aware and getting to know people on an individual basis. Next, we have your attitude towards colleagues and parents. So let's talk about the first one, colleagues. Hopefully you will all work in a place where it's just this magical thing, where everyone gets along and everyone supports each other and has, the same visions and goals for students, and that's for everyone to be successful and for all the teachers to be successful. Sadly, we know that that is not reality, and sometimes there are negative relationships among colleagues. So I just want to encourage you to, again, be professional and positive. And again, the next part of that, when we think about our attitude toward parents, there are going to be some parents that you work very, very well with. And there are going to be some parents that you really may not be able to see eye to eye without some true effort on your part. And then we have that attitude towards our subject matter. Are you passionate about what you're teaching? And it's so funny. There's a book out that's called Teach Like a Pirate, and it's a really good book. It's one of those books that as I read it, I just kept saying, yay, amen, amen. One of the things that the author talks about at the very beginning of the book is how that he really could care less about bird watching, but he's at a park one day and he meets this man who is an avid and an enthusiastic bird watcher. And this man begins to tell the author of the book the stories about how wonderful this is and all the wonderful things that he sees about birds. And the author's talking about, he says this man's enthusiasm was really infectious and really just got him excited about bird watching. And he goes on to talk about, I'm still not an avid bird watcher. It's not something I'm going to pick up as a hobby. But because of that man, it really sparked an interest and a learning in me. So making sure that you are very enthusiastic about your subject matter. Teacher expectations are going to be influenced by race, social class, gender, other teachers, and more. It may be unconscious. This was talked earlier about it. It's oftentimes a human nature to really kind of group kids together, and maybe those groupings are not fair. The teacher expectations can be communicated to students. Students in your classroom can oftentimes pick up on these students that are a little more easygoing and maybe the students that are a little more challenging. Affecting student behavior and performance is that self-fulfilling prophecy. So basically what we're talking about here, and it's how you think that you're going to perform. Oftentimes, not always, but oftentimes that is how you perform. So basically you live up to your expectations. All right. When we think about what subject matter knowledge does the effective teacher possess? Discipline content. The structure, the elements, the logic, the possible uses, and the social biases of subject content. Guys, I can't tell you how important it is to, when we go back to the piece here about possible uses, I can't tell you how important it is to give students that real world example of how this can actually be applicable to your daily life. Curriculum content. We have to know the school and district curriculum and the standards. Of course, here we're going to be looking at state standards when we're thinking about our Arkansas curriculum frameworks. The pedagogical content. Guys, pedagogy is a word that we throw around a lot in education, and it is just a big fancy word for how do you teach what you are teaching. Are you using worksheets? Are you doing hands-on? Are you doing activities? Are you doing cooperative learning? Pedagogy is how do you teach? All right, some theories versus theories in use. A theory is going to be an unproved explanation of why something happens the way it does, and it's a basis for hypothesis, further study, and research. Then the theory in use is going to be an idea held by a person and used as basis of dealing with others. It can be often unexamined but assumed to be true. All right. Effective teachers. We all know that effective teachers have to be good classroom managers. They can be enthusiastic, they can be excited, but if they can't manage a classroom effectively, then we have some issues. Okay, if you want to look closer at this chart, it is in your text on page 175. All right, we have the behavior modification, and that is B.F. Skinner, and he is oftentimes associated with the idea of behaviorism. Behaviorism is all about extrinsic things that impress upon us. So things outside that impress upon us. And it says here, originates from behavioral psychology, modify student behavior by consistently and systematically rewarding or reinforcing appropriate student behavior and removing rewards for or punishing inappropriate student behavior. Then we have the social emotional climate, and the major developers here are Carl Rogers and William Glasser and Haynes Janot. We looked at William Glasser when we talked about the Glasser's choice theory in previous chapters. The characteristics of this originates in counseling and clinical psychology. The emphasis is on building positive interpersonal relationships between students and teachers. The next approach to classroom management that we have is the group process. Richard Schmuck and Patricia Schmuck, Lois Johnson and Mary Banney, originates in social psychology and group dynamics research. There's an emphasis on teacher establishing and maintaining effective, productive classroom group. Unity and cooperation as well as group problem solving are key elements. Next, we have the ecological approach to classroom management. Jacob Coonan and Paul Gump. The emphasis is on the habitat. It's all about how that the environment affects a child. The physical content has elements that must be established and maintained, and managed to maintain order, such as planning and organizing lessons, monitoring activities, and explaining rules. Lastly, on this chart, at least, we have the authority approach to classroom management. Lee Cantor and Marlene Cantor views classroom management as a process of controlling student behavior, primarily by using discipline. The emphasis is on establishing and enforcing rules, using soft reprimands and orders to desist. Assertive discipline is a popular manifestation of this approach. All right, Coonan's research on effective classroom management, and if you remember, Coonan is they're associated with the ecological approach to classroom management that we saw on the last page, and the emphasis there again is on habitat. Okay, so how does the environment affect teachers and students? Effective teachers use these skills: witness, smoothness, momentum. Effective teachers avoid these slowdown behaviors, overdwelling, and fragmentation. So basically what we're looking at as far as fragmentation is there needs to be a flow in your classroom. Some guidelines for effective classroom management. Of course, we want to establish rules and routines, define them early, and have students help so that they have some buy-in to the rules for your class. Ensure students' compliance. We want to establish positive relationships and be willing to administer consequences. And guys, I don't want to rush through that first point about establishing positive relationships. How do you establish positive relationships? You have to be a trusted person in that classroom. You have to be effective. You have to show the students that you care for them as well. That will go a long way in establishing positive relationships. All right, lastly, we're going to involve families, communicate before there's a problem so that if or when there is an issue, you have that positive communication flow established, and make sure that they understand the rules as well. You can do this in multiple ways. You can have meetings, you can have an email go out, you can have a newsletter that goes out, and just really what you'll need to do is let them understand the rules in multiple ways, because parents, just like students, they oftentimes have, or not oftentimes, they have different learning styles. All right, our last slide is going to look at effective questioning techniques. This is a great way to get students engaged in your classroom. We want to phrase questions clearly and ask brief questions. We want to link questions to lesson objectives. We want to ask thought-provoking questions and avoid asking yes, no, or leading questions. So what we really refer to those in the education world as open-ended questions, where it takes more than a word or two to answer those questions. We want to question a range of students, and we want to balance volunteers with non-volunteers. So just because someone doesn't raise their hand doesn't mean that they don't get asked a question. But here's the thing, we have to give kids wait time. So wait time means after I ask a question, you need to pause and wait. Don't just wait for the first person to raise their hand or already know who you're going to call on, because what we know about thought processes in classrooms where we don't have wait time is that students will quickly learn who are the question answerers in this classroom. And so if I know that this person sitting 2 rows over from me is consistently going to correctly answer questions, then I don't even have to think about the answer. But if there really is that thought that, hey, that teacher might call on me, then I need to go ahead and have my answer ready in my head. And then we want to encourage students to respond in some way to every question and probe and provide feedback on responses. All right, I want to talk about this encouraging students to respond in some way to every question. Okay, so what are some ways that we can encourage everyone to respond to questions? You know, I've seen a variety of things over the years. It could be something as simple as everyone have out a piece of paper and jot down your answer and then maybe turn and share it with a partner. I've seen teachers have the small dry erase boards, and every student has one, and you quickly write your answer on your dry erase board, and then when the teacher asks, you turn the dry erase board so that the teacher can look at your answer and kind of get an idea of, did you understand the material? I've seen, electronic responses you can use like Socrative, or there are clickers out, where you can, there are answers on the board and you click in your answer, things like Kahoot and quizzes. These are all digital ways that we can get students involved and do those formative assessments. And when I say formative assessments, I mean the assessments that we do throughout our lesson to get a feel for what are students learning, what are they processing, and how are they understanding the information. Okay, so that is going to be it for my comments that go along with this PowerPoint. Don't forget to check Blackboard for assignments for this week. I'm enjoying all of your Flipgrids that you've been doing thus far, and I'm really excited to see all of the responses that I'm having in weekly quizzes and also vocabulary quizzes. Don't forget about school board meetings. School board meetings, do not put that off, because it will definitely sneak up on you, as public school boards only meet once a month. So be sure that you have a plan for that and that you are staying on top of that so you don't turn that in late. All right. I hope that you all have a wonderful week, and if you have any questions, you can always email me at jonesk@uaccm.edu. I hope you have a great day.